I uncovered 3 terrifying true horror stories from rainy nights, but one will haunt me forever. I never should have opened that door. Rain pounded against the window, a relentless assault of water that mirrored the chaos brewing inside me. I was just sitting there, wrapped in the comfort of a blanket, a hot cup of tea in my trembling hands. The evening felt normal, routine. But as the clock ticked past midnight, a chilling whisper seemed to echo through the darkness. The shadows in my room stretched and twisted, creeping closer as a gust of wind rattled the frame. I could smell the dampness, that musty scent of wet wood and mold. I closed my eyes, willing the weird sensations to dissolve, but they refused to leave. I opened my eyes again. The flickering candle danced nervously, casting eerie shapes upon the walls, twisting my thoughts into something sinister that I could hear faint scratching. At first, I brushed it off as the wind, but it grew louder, more insistent, almost desperate. My heart raced. The room felt colder, the air thick with dread. Objects shifted slightly, just outside my line of sight. A book fell from the shelf, thudding against the wooden floor. I jumped, gasping, as the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. Then, I began to recall the stories I had read about rainy nights. The first told of a lone traveler, caught in a downpour, who stumbled into a haunted inn. Whispers filled the air, growing louder until they screamed for his soul. The second spoke of a couple in love, their affection shattered by the dark figure who watched them from the rain-soaked shadows. They disappeared without a trace, only their echoes remaining. But it was the third story that gripped me, wrapping my chest in a vice-like fear, a child who claimed to see a ghostly figure in her bedroom during storms. They found her smiling at the dark silhouette, just moments before her disappearance. Chills ran down my spine as I remembered that just last week, my own niece had asked if she could stay over during a storm. The scratching grew worse. Something was moving. I could hear the floorboards creak under the weight of, what? My breath hitched at the thought. I grabbed my phone, scanning the dark corners through its dim light. Nothing. Just shadows swaying. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. The sound was jarring, a horrifying blend of chaos against the backdrop of the relentless rain. My heart was pounding, a war drum demanding I run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I was immobilized, trapped in a fog of confusion and fear. Then I noticed it. A shadow slipped across the doorframe, growing larger. My heart dropped. I could feel the weight of dread pressing down on me, filling my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I never should have opened that door. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The scratching escalated into a frenzy, claws raking across the wood like fingernails scraping against a chalkboard. The air turned electric, a knot tightening inside me with each pulse against my ribcage. I gripped the blanket tighter, my knuckles white against the deep crimson fabric. The world outside had become a torrent, the rain sheeting down like hammering nails. As the echoes of the crash settled, a hissing breath whispered through the narrow crack beneath my door. It wasn't the wind, it sounded too sentient, almost playful, like a child's taunting giggle turned sinister. My mind spun in panic. Should I move? Should I call for help? But what help could come when every ghost story I had just dug through the recesses of my memory played on loop? Those chilling tales were no longer distant fiction, they felt alive and laughing at my folly. With a sudden surge of desperation, I reached for my phone, the light flickering faintly in the oppressive darkness. I didn't want to be the protagonist who sat trembling in fright as something sinister approached. I had to take action. I began to quietly shuffle backward, inching toward my window, my mind racing for answers, a plan, anything. But the realization struck like a fist of ice. The window was locked tight. Then I heard a sound that froze my blood, the soft thud of footsteps, almost hesitant, creeping near. I felt each vibration through the floorboards. My heart quickened as the footsteps stopped, but the scratching continued, now accompanied by a whispering chant, echoing like a long-forgotten lullaby in my ears. "Come play with me." Turned back toward the door, my breath shallow as silence enveloped me. Suddenly, my phone's screen brightened, illuminating the room in a frail halo. I had received a message, but from who? The unknown number flashed ominously on the screen, and the word struck my heart like a knife. "I can see you." Panic surged through me, and I stumbled backward, my foot catching on the edge of the rug, sending me crashing against the wall. In that instant, the whisper softened to a single word: my name. It was an unsettling reminder that I wasn't just trapped by walls or locked doors. I was ensnared in something far worse, something that had woven its very being into the fabric of this night. The chanting escalated again, now more urgent, filling every corner of the room with suffocating dread. Shadows twisted and morphed, taking on grotesque shapes, beckoning me. No. I cried, backing away, my mind racing to piece together my escape. I thought of the stories I had just read, about the powers that awaken during rainstorms. Perhaps I needed to confront it, to draw the entity toward me, to make it reveal itself. Gathering what courage I could muster, I shouted into the darkness, "What do you want?" The atmosphere turned thick as if I had disrupted a fragile balance, and for a moment, all sound ceased. But then, as if my words awakened something that had been slumbering, the scratching intensified, frantically clawing now, splintering the silence with each desperate swipe, and then it happened. The wooden door splintered, slowly creaking open against the pressure of something unseen. The flickering candlelight illuminated a figure standing just beyond the threshold. It was a small child, drenched from the rain, hair dripping, and eyes wide with an unearthly glow. "I've been waiting for you to play." Before I could gather my senses, the shadows billowed around her, coalescing into a nightmare. The last thing I saw before the candle extinguished was the look of unholy delight crossing her face, and then there was nothing but darkness, the silence wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. As the world blurred into night, whispers echoed relentlessly, fading into a dreadful question: "Will you play with us forever?" My heart drummed wildly, a frantic rhythm that echoed in my ears as I struggled to comprehend the void that replaced both light and sound. The air was thick with something malevolent, a suffocating presence wrapping itself around my throat, tightening with each ragged breath. I blinked, hoping to pierce the darkness, but it held firm, an oppressive curtain that concealed whatever horror lingered just beyond my reach. I willed myself to stand, to break free from the clutch of nausea curling in my stomach. The remnants of my fear turned into determination. I cursed myself for allowing the shadows to ensnare me. I had to find a way out of this nightmare. With careful, deliberate movements, I made my way toward the door, guided only by the memories of my surroundings. The scratching had stopped, but the chilling silence hummed with a pulse of its own, a heartbeat of dread echoing in the stillness. Each step was a gamble. I could feel the periphery of something lurking nearby, my skin prickled with the awareness that I was not alone. Just as I reached the doorframe, the darkness shifted, pulling at the edges of my sanity. I closed my eyes tightly and whispered a desperate prayer to any higher power who might listen. When I opened them again, a faint glow caught my attention, spilling in from the minuscule crack under the door, a flickering luminescence that seemed to pulse with life, almost enticing. Fueled by a mix of curiosity and dread, I crouched down and peered through the gap. On the other side, the small child stood frozen, still and expectant, her drenched figure having morphed into a more distinct shape in the dim light. But now, she was not alone. Behind her, shadows writhed, twisting in shapes too disturbing to comprehend, faces appearing and disappearing like flickering flames grasping for release. "Don't be afraid," her voice echoed softly, yet there was an unmistakable undercurrent of impatience lacing her words. "We just want to play." A chill ran through me. "What are you?" I managed to croak out, the question barely more than a whisper. I felt a pulse within me, the echoes of forgotten tales where children lured the unwary to their demise, and I could already perceive the veil of terror thickening around me. "I am the same as you," she replied with an unnatural sweetness. "I'm waiting." "Just like you," the whisper of her voice played tricks on my mind, tugging at past childhood memories, the innocent laughter of playing hide and seek, the thrill of the unknown. But this invitation was twisted, spun from the threads of something ancient and foul. "I don't want to play," I responded, my voice gaining strength, a rebellion budging within the flood of terror. "Too late." The child giggled, and the air trembled. The shadows echoed her laughter, rising and swirling like a tempest, and I felt the ground beneath me shift, the floorboards creaking ominously. Suddenly, the door shuddered violently as if something from the other side was trying to break through, slamming against the wood with a ferocity that shook me to my core. The glow intensified, blinding, a flooding light filling the gap. It was at that moment I realized it was not just the shadows that surrounded her but other figures, more children, faces marred by ashen hues and unnatural grins, their hollow eyes trained on me. "Let her come play with us," they chanted, their whispers forming an inescapable chorus, a welling storm of desire that swirled and coiled, promising both delight and doom. No. I shouted, the defiance surfacing as I pushed myself back against the wall. I pressed my palm against the wood, desperation clawing at my throat, knowing if I let them in, I would join their ranks, trapped in a game where the stakes were far too high. But the door trembled again, splintering under the relentless force, squeezing the breath from my lungs with the threat of its imminent collapse. Just then, I felt something grasp my ankle, a cold hand that sent ice through my veins as I glanced down to find a shadow twisting around my foot, pulling me farther toward the door. With every ounce of strength, I kicked and twisted, feeling an agonizing sensation grip my heart as the chill of their whispers lulled me into submission. "Come play," they sang, a distant melody wrapping around my reason, and I felt the pull of temptation. In that fevered moment, the world spun violently, and the door buckled, splintering in a cacophony of wood and screams. For a single heartbeat, everything froze, a silence pressing down hard and heavy upon me. I could feel the child's distilled glee reflecting back from the void, and then, it broke. The door asunder, brilliant light spilled forth, and the shadows screeched, recoiling. But I was not free. As something pulled me closer to the threshold, my scream froze in my throat, and in the gleam of that light, I saw a reflection not my own but countless faces writhing, smiling, an abyss of unsatisfied sorrow and playful malice, reaching for me. "Will you join us forever?" echoed in my ears as I was dragged across the threshold, falling into the depths of their eerie laughter, the world dissolving into chaos. The last thing I saw was the little girl's unholy delight as I slipped into darkness, and then I was gone. The weight of silence constricted around me, an all-encompassing shroud that felt nourished by my dread. I expected to drift into a nightmarish oblivion, yet instead, I found myself adrift in a world that was neither fully alive nor dead, a twilight realm suspended between the two, pulsating with a tension that vibrated in the marrow of my bones. The air was thick with an iron tang, an unsettling perfume laced with whispers. As I struggled to gain my bearings, I realized my body was weightless, an eerie feeling that unraveled the threads of fear and replaced them with a raw, omnipresent curiosity. I floated, pulled by invisible currents, my mind clouded by the echoes of those hollow voices. Come play," they beckoned, a siren call that tugged at the remnants of my sanity. Surrounding me, shadows danced against a backdrop of a blurred landscape. I couldn't discern the source of light, it seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere all at once, casting an unsettling glow on the familiar faces of other children. They swirled in chaos, their feet dangling above a formless abyss. Their eyes had turned black, reflecting back the chaos of this peculiar realm. Desperate to break free from their intoxicating pull, I searched for something, anything, that would anchor me back to reality. With every passing heartbeat, the whispers swelled in intensity, filling my mind with flashes of their hollow laughter as their ethereal bodies drifted closer. I caught a glimpse of them playing near a street made of mist, their laughter echoing like a cruel melody over the void. "Why did you leave us?" one of them asked, a girl with long, tangled hair and a dress that seemed stitched from shadows themselves. "It's more fun here. Here, no one can hurt you." A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face as she reached out, translucent fingers brushing against my own. Their words clawed through my thoughts. Twisted memories began to surface, interlaced with forgotten moments of warmth and love, but marred by the ache of abandonment. I remembered birthdays and laughter fading into silence, my parents' backs turned to my please, all memories tinged with a regret so profound it burned like acid in my chest. Join us, they intoned, their voices harmonizing into an unsettling choir that wrapped around me, squeezing tighter. I shook my head vigorously, pain igniting in my temples. The vision of my life outside of this realm wavered, the familiar blurring into obscurity, leaving nothing but a gaping void begging to be filled. What they offered was intoxicating, a chance to escape, to shed the burdens of despair that plagued the living. But that sweetness turned rancid when I glimpsed glimpses of their true nature, the despair clawing at their hearts, never to be satiated. Each smile held a silent scream, each laugh masked deep sorrow. Then, as if sensing my reluctance, the shadows roared back to life, twisting and swirling in a frenzy. I felt the abrupt chill of something sharp graze my cheek, a sinister caress of claws dancing across my skin. The little girl's expression shifted, a mask of impatience slipping into something more sinister. "You have to decide," she whispered through clenched teeth, her eyes narrowing. "A game has begun." Suddenly, I could perceive the outlines of a towering structure in the distance, something fleeting yet maddening. A twisted carousel emerged, swathed in semi-transparent ribbons of smoke and ethereal light, its music weaving a hauntingly surreal melody that could draw even the strongest soul into its depths. The carousel rotated, revealing gaunt horse figures, eyes gleaming with devilish glee. Fun times. The chorus of laughter surged around me, blending in with the haunting notes of the carousel, a cacophony of joy twisted dark. "One ride and you'll be one of us," panic clawed at my insides, and I grasped the edges of my memories, fighting vehemently against the thrall that bound me. There had to be a way out. I focused on the faces of my family, the warmth of my mother's arms, the sound of my father's laughter, the lifeline I would not sever. With purpose blooming through the fear, I tore my gaze from the dark amusement and screamed into the void, "Not today." But even as the statue children recoiled at my defiance, the carousel began to spin faster, shadows reaching out, their grasp growing more insistent. I felt something latch onto my ankle, another icy touch pushing me toward the brink, not just of laughter, but of despair. Suddenly, an ear-splitting crack echoed around me, and the ground beneath began to shudder violently. The children screamed, the harmonious laughter shattering into chaos as the very fabric of this eerie existence began to unravel. I closed my eyes, aware I was teetering on the edge of oblivion, and braced for the plunge back into darkness. The final whisper cut through the noise, shrill and piercing, pulling me into the fray. "Choose. Or you'll never escape." I felt myself being tugged in two directions, the darkness coiling tightly around my throat, pulling me toward the carousel, while the flickering light of escape faded into the screams of the forsaken. As I gasped for breath, the world erupted into a blinding burst of light, illuminations of past happiness battling against the obliterating pull of despair, and I knew the truth of my fate clung to me like a second skin. I had to choose, and in that choice, something irrevocable loomed. My heart raced as the ground cracked beneath me, and the darkness echoed my decision back at me. "Well, see you soon," it hissed, just as my grasp on reality began to slip through the sieve of shadows, and then I was swallowed whole. The chaos of light shattered, plunging me into a vortex of soundless darkness where time lost all meaning. My senses reeled, engulfed by a frigid void that matched the hollow ache within my chest. I no longer floated, I fell, spiraling through blackened corridors that twisted and turned like a funhouse mirror reflecting nightmares. A cloying mist formed around me as I tumbled, swirling shapes slithering at the corners of my vision. And then, I landed with a thud, a jarring break from the disorienting plunge. I gasped, the dusty air filling my lungs with a bitter weight. As I slowly pushed myself up, muted sunlight filtered through a lattice of broken glass and unseen entities, casting a sickly pallor over my surroundings. The room I was in extended endlessly, a vast, decrepit hall either deserted or filled with hidden eyes watching from the shadows. The walls pulsed with a sickly rhythm, and I could feel the very structure of this place throbbing with an ancient malevolence. An overwhelming urge to flee clawed at my insides, yet a morbid fascination rooted me to the spot as I studied the grotesque murals sprawled across the walls, grotesquely depicting scenes of feverish delight and unholy revelry. In the far distance, the sound of rustling fabric and muffled giggles crept into my awareness that I turned sharply, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I was met instead with the chilling sight of a door yawning open at the end of the hall. Thick fog billowed from the opening, swirling like a living thing, whispering innocuous temptations designed to ensnare the lost. It echoed the taunts of the children I had left behind, each insistence a dagger to my heart. "Don't you want to come play?" Swallowing the knot of fear lodged in my throat, I forced myself to step closer to the door. As I approached, the coolness of the air sliced through the growing heat of panic. The door creaked ominously as I reached for the handle, and just as my fingers brushed its surface, the unsettling laughter crescendoed, warping into a cacophony of lost souls wailing in torment. It struck me in that moment, the realization that I was standing on the threshold of something that sought to ensnare me for eternity. The door swung open, revealing a cavernous space littered with remnants of shattered mirrors, old toys, and spectral echoes from another time. A chill rushed out to greet me, icy fingers of dread creeping under my skin. Just as I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me with a resonating finality. Heart pounding in a wild rhythm, I let out a panicked breath. A dim glow from the far side of the room illuminated figures that moved with a fluid grace amid the shards of glass scattered across the floor. They spun in a dance that seemed both jubilant and horrific, faces morphed into grotesque masks of glee punctuated by hollow, sunken eyes that glared back at me with unearthly hunger. "Play with us." A voice sang, lilting and sinister, emanating from a figure clad in tattered, once bright clothing. It twirled effortlessly, spinning down towards me like a marionette cut free from its strings. My heart raced as I squinted, trying to discern features amongst the swirling shadows. A face emerged, laughing, yet twisted in agony. I caught a flash of recognition, the boy from my childhood, Tommy, who had vanished one dreary afternoon, a smile that had once filled my heart now a twisted shadow looming over me. "Tommy?" I breathed, my voice cracking with both hope and dread. The figure stopped mid-laugh, head tilting to the side, the expression unervingly split between mischief and insanity. "You see," Tommy cooed, extending a pallid hand towards me, "we're all waiting. Waiting for you to join the fun. You don't want to miss it, do you?" He twirled back into the throng, where giggling children melted into shapeless shadows that swarmed around me, beckoning with ghostly hands. "No. I have to leave." I screamed, backing away, my heart thudded violently against the walls of my chest. With every step I took, the cacophony of laughter grew louder, almost mocking. I had to escape this madness, this cosmic joke at the expense of lives lost and tormented souls trapped in revelry, yet as I turned to find the door, a gaping rift had opened where it once stood, a swirling mass of darkness that beckoned, promising eternal play. The shadows shifted and coiled around my feet, pulling me towards the depths of despair. I felt the warmth draining away as the children inched closer, their laughter intertwining with desperate whispers urging me not to fight, but to give in, to embrace the endless night. In my panic, I stumbled into the center of their gathering, eyes darting as the figures whirled like a cyclone of despair. "Join us," they chorused, voices layered and rich with longing, their mouths stretching into wide, grotesque grins that shimmered with predatory delight. "Don't look." Tommy yelled suddenly, his voice rising above the sea of chaos, eyes warning me as they darkened. "Don't let them take you." I gripped my head in agony, my last strand of resolve slipping through my fingers like sand. The edges of my sight flared with blinding light, and I could feel the pull, a transcendent call climbing from the depths of my despair, drowning out Tommy's cries. The last thing I felt was the sudden solitude of a new darkness, enveloping my senses until even the memory of light began to wash away. I closed my eyes, yet the laughter continued to peel back the layers of my sanity as I found myself standing on that brink again. But this time, the ground began to shatter beneath me. "Let go!" cried a voice from deep within, mingling with the cacophony. And then, the floor gave way entirely. The ground crumbled into nothingness, a yawning abyss threatening to swallow me whole. The sudden drop sent a violent surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins, the very air around me warping as I plunged into a dark void, rattled echoes of laughter staying just beyond reach. As I plummeted, I grasped desperately for any semblance of reality left in my grasp, the insatiable call of the children haunting me relentlessly. Just when I thought I would be swallowed by the eternal darkness, I landed abruptly upon a surface far more solid than I could have imagined. The impact rattled me deeply, throwing my mind further into disarray. Expecting the cold embrace of infinite blackness, I was instead met with something warmly familiar, the smell of wet earth, decay, and an unsettling sweetness that gnawed at my gut. That I blinked against the sudden dimness, my senses slowly awakening within a space that felt both foreign and eerily intimate. Around me, the walls pulsed rhythmically, not unlike a heartbeat, sending tremors through the air. Below me, the ground resembled a mosaic, each tile a different shade of black, glistening ominously beneath some unseen light source. Ghostly wisps curled through the corners of my vision, and with growing dread, I recognized the vibrant colors of the myriad children's toys scattered amongst the debris, the remnants of an abandoned playground married to memories I thought lost. That a chilling realization dawned on me: this was not a mere descent into darkness, but a point of convergence. The dissonant laughter still echoed through the air, but now it resonated within these very walls. I stood on the threshold of an accursed realm, where forgotten wishes and sorrowful screams fused into a ghastly chorus that played on repeat. "Why do you tread so lightly, dear?" A voice slithered through the stagnation, smooth as silk yet wrought with malice. I spun around to find a figure half enshadowed, a woman whose form shimmered, her hair flowed like smoke, dark and ethereal, framing a visage that dripped with an unsettling allure. Her luminous eyes drank in my fear, sparkled with a malicious delight that set my instincts ablaze. "I had to come back, didn't I?" I stammered, a bitter pit forming in my throat as she inched closer. "You've been waiting, oh, much longer than you can imagine." The cadence of her voice coiled around me, tightening, drawing me closer against my will. "You haunt us, dear child, more than you realize." A vision flickered behind her eyes, a montage of days spent playing, sun-drenched afternoons dissolved into echoes of cries, desperate search for what could not be found. Tommy's face curled within her gaze, frozen in laughter, a warning concealed behind twisted lips. "Tommy," I whispered, and she laughed, a melodious intrusion filled with shifting shadows, distorting the memories that I clung to as if they were life rafts. "Do you see it now?" Her eyes glimmered, a thousand terrible stories reflected within, each more treacherous than the last. "This is where we play forever. Wouldn't you want to join us?" The ground beneath began to shudder, a low rumble building with the insistence of her words, the great yawning chasm tantruming with anguish and urgency. Through the cracks and disarray, I saw dark tendrils slowly twisting upwards, snaking towards my feet, drawing energy from the fear thrumming around me. No. My voice fought against the seductive lull of her menace, but my protest felt feeble against the tide of overwhelming belonging. The laughter rose around me, a haunting invitation stepping closer to calamity. As if sensing my will fraying, the shadows erupted into childlike forms, those same twisted echoes, now amorphous monsters cloaked in brightly colored rags. "Join the fun," they echoed, voices mingling in cacophony, circling me as if I were the center of a macabre dance. As they swirled, their shapes flickered through memories lost, faces I remembered mixing with the faceless shroud of forgotten nightmares. Panic reverberated through me like a drum, a racing heart propelling me to dash towards the center of this cursed playground where I could barely discern which was real and which an apparition. Just as I reached the hollow pit at its core, the woman's laughter swelled, building to a crescendo, wildly hypnotizing, pulling me deeper towards its endless embrace. "Let your fears slip away," she commanded, her voice resonating like a dulcet spell. "Embrace your origins. Join your friends forever." Before I could stammer a reply, the ground buckled beneath my feet as though awakening from some sinister slumber, plunging me downward into the swirling chaos below. I drifted, helpless and flailing, spiraling into an unfathomable abyss, and as darkness enveloped me, the last thing that pierced my consciousness was the undeniable solitude mingled with fragmented laughter, the echo of intertwined voices rolling over one another as I sank into an inescapable void. But then, from the depths of despair, I heard Tommy's voice, clear and confident but tortured, rising above the tempest of terror. "Don't listen to them. Run. In that heartbeat of clarity, I felt the crushing weight of dread just as the ground beneath me gave way once again, yet this time, it wasn't the emptiness that loomed below that instilled true horror, but the flickering vision of a bright future repeating endlessly at the edge of the abyss. For I was not alone. The weight of cold air pressed down as I spiraled through that endless void, time twisting around me like a grotesque serpent. I felt my body being torn asunder, each heartbeat resonating with the chimes of laughter that echoed through my very being. In that instant of panic, the sensation of Tommy's desperate call echoed, and I felt the shattering fragments of reality pressing in on every side. Suddenly, I hit another solid surface, a jarring shock that rattled me to the core. I gasped for breath, the earthy aroma of decay creeping back into my lungs. I lay sprawled on damp ground, disoriented and frightened, the laughter now faded into a distant thrum. As I regained my composure, I thrust my eyes open, scanning my surroundings with frantic urgency. I appeared to be in a cave, the walls adorned with grotesque carvings that twisted and writhed as shadows danced along the surfaces, their movements almost sentient. Black light emanated from grains of a stony matrix, casting eerie reflections upon the jagged walls. Silvery rivulets snaked along the edges, glimmering like blood upon rock, pooling ominously in grooved gutters. An unnatural chill radiated through the damp air, and it felt like the very walls were whispering to me, closing in with every heartbeat. "Tommy?" The sound was merely a ghost of a question, trembling under the weight of my anxious anticipation. With each jagged breath, the faintest echo returned, but nothing tangible answered me. I found my feet beneath me, wobbling ever so slightly as I ventured into the suffocating darkness. Every step was a harrowing dance with the shadows that loomed closer, creeping along my spine like icy fingers threatening to wrench me into the fray. A distant laughter bubbled up from the ground, mocking and distorted, echoing through my mind. I pressed on, desperate to find an exit or a sign through the oppressive dimness. After several agonizing minutes, I stumbled upon a space where the cave opened up into a larger chamber, the ceiling towering above me like the jaws of some ancient beast. My heart raced. At the far end lay an enormous altar carved from a dark mineral that glowed with an obsidian sheen, glinting invitingly in the semi-opaque darkness. Enigmatic symbols spiraled around its base, designs both beautiful and grotesque, inviting yet foreboding. As I approached the altar, I felt an unholy vibration resonate from beneath my feet, spawning wicked intentions within me. My heart constricted when I found a mound of objects atop the altar, children's toys ensconced in dust and grime, each one an echo of my past, a ragged teddy bear with a button eye, a rusted tricycle, and a faded jigsaw puzzle piece that I recognized from a summer long ago. Their presence sent icy tendrils crawling along my spine. No. No. I protested, horror creeping into my voice as realization began to dawn about the significance of each relic. I flinched at the encroaching memories, visions swirling without control, the playground, laughter, and pain merging into an overwhelming sense of loss. Then, without warning, an overpowering wind surged into the chamber, chilling the air to freezing point. The oppressive pressure erupted into chaos, slamming walls around me. I turned to flee, but the darkness thickened, coiling around my limbs like an inescapable vice. Heart pounding, I invoked every ounce of strength to wrestle forward. In that moment of desperation, I caught the glimpse of Tommy, standing just a few feet ahead, framed in the dim light like a tender beacon. His eyes glimmered with both familiarity and terror as they met mine. "I found you." A voice echoed, not just his but entwined with a chorus that rose and fell like a tide. I wept, faltering towards him, stretching my hand in a mingling of hope and dread. "Don't come any closer," Tommy warned, his voice strained. He was impossibly pale, shadows carving deeper lines into his youthful face, a harbinger of horror that staggered me. "They're coming." Shadows twisted nearby, grotesque figures materializing as if drawn forth from the very fabric of the cavern. A multitude of eyes glimmered in the dark, fixating upon me, and their laughter melded into an agonizing, chilling chorus. A sense of dread washed over me as I felt the ground beneath my feet quaking, rupturing with a fierce energy that reached up to him. The altar trembled violently, debris raining down as fingers of darkness reached for me, insatiable in their hunger. "Run!" he screamed, but it didn't matter. I felt myself being swept away into a tumult of shadow, curling into the icy limbs that sought to clutch my essence. And then, as I was engulfed in darkness, the cave erupted into an explosion of shrieking laughter, a cacophony that melded into a single piercing scream. Everything began to fade as I fought the blackness swallowing me whole. Just when I dared believe despair would consume my very soul, Tommy's figure flickered once more, his panicked eyes meeting mine. "Don't let them take you. You belong to the playground." His words thudded within me, igniting a fire of resistance, but before I could muster the strength to push against the dark tide, the shadows violently pressed in tighter, forcing my eyes shut against the inevitable. Cracking beyond the veil of chaos, a new laughter rang out, a sound that twisted my heartstrings into knots both familiar and grotesque, yet layered with dissonant joy. And as the shrieks crescendoed, I realized what lay beyond the edge of my consciousness, a nightmarish symphony echoing promises of lost innocence, beckoning me deeper into the abyss. In that moment of total despair, I felt the grip of the abyss tightening around me, the sinister sensation of countless hands pulling me down, and I screamed, the very sound drowned by the symphony of laughter echoing back as thick darkness claimed me. The plummet came as a jolt, the sensation of weightlessness quickly replaced by a bone-jarring impact. I landed on something soft, disorienting me. Blinking against the overwhelming darkness, I realized I was sprawled on a bed of damp leaves, the air thick with stench. The musty aroma of decay was more intense here than anywhere else I had been. I pushed myself up, eyes darting to decode the surrounding shadows that flickered against the periphery, while the echoes of the laughter still reverberated in the distance, a haunting reminder of what I had narrowly escaped. Shivering in a cold sweat, I struggled to gather my bearings. Tall, gnarled trees loomed overhead, their branches curling like skeletal fingers against the night sky. The forest swallowed sound, a profound silence wrapping around me like a shroud. Yet, I felt an unseen presence watching, its breath tickling the nape of my neck. A prickling sensation raced up my spine, urging me to run. With cautious steps, I forced myself to rise and venture into the gloom, the squelch of damp earth beneath my feet a grotesque soundtrack to my dread. My thoughts were a muddled cacophony, and Tommy's face loomed large in my mind, his frantic warning echoing like a dark prophecy. "You belong to the playground." The realization struck like a thunderclap. What did he mean? Was it the playground from our childhood? The rickety swings and rusted slides invaded my thoughts, suffused with nostalgia and fear. Bile rose in my throat. That playground had long since been abandoned, overrun by nature, yet somehow it felt like it bled into this dark wood. As I pushed deeper into the forest, the laughter morphed into whispers soft, insidious, luring me onwards through the twisted trunks. Shattered images flitted before my eyes, glimpses of children, their faces twisted in glee, yet marked with shadows that shouldn't belong in such innocent recollections. I was being pulled into a trap, the memories dragging me into the deepening darkness. Suddenly, an overwhelming wave of panic surged within. I stumbled to a halt when a guttural sound erupted from the underbrush, a terrible growl that vibrated through my bones, sending chills racing through my body. I turned, heart racing, the whispers growing louder as they encroached upon me. Something was coming. Frantic thoughts of escape raced in my mind when the ground trembled beneath my feet again, this time in rhythm, as if something massive was dragging itself towards me. Its form slowly emerged from the shadows, liquid-like, dripping and pulsing in amorphous mass that flowed with shadows, solidifying occasionally into grotesque faces that leered and clawed at the air. "Join us," they rasped, mouth stretching unnaturally as the laughter grew louder, an unfurling tapestry of madness. The noise bore into every crevice of my mind, the familiarity twisting into something horrifying, barely recognizable. "You belong to us, forever." I stumbled backward, panic swelling, the whispers morphed into screams, a choir of children lamenting, their voices overlapping with the laughter, unbearably close yet veiled in darkness. With a guttural roar, the mass lunged towards me, shadows spilling across the forest floor like treacle, pulling me toward its depths. "Tommy!" I screamed, my voice barely rising above the chaos surrounding me. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Just beyond the mass of shadows, I spotted Tommy's form rising from the darkness, his pallor now resembling the ghosts encircling us. "Help me!" I cried in desperation, extending my trembling hands toward him. "Don't!" he shouted, and anguish seared through me, cutting deeper than the dark tendril stretching towards us. "You'll be taken. We have to get away." As he approached, the horrific mass shifted, recoiling as if stung, and the whispers fell silent, replaced by a cacophony of unnerving silence. But it was not fear that controlled the shadows, rather, they throbbed with anticipation, coiling back like a snake poised to strike. Just as he reached me, a blinding light erupted from behind, illuminating the twisted shadows and cutting through the darkness. I turned, squinting against the eerie glow to see a flickering carousel come to life, its brightly painted horses dancing beneath the spotlight, blending twisted beauty and horror. The carousel began to spin wildly, emitting a grotesque melody that warped and distorted, echoing the laughter that had taunted me earlier. "Get back!" Tommy shouted, but it was too late. A disembodied horse whinnied with malicious excitement, lunging forward in a flurry of mist, and Tommy was swept away into the spinning madness. No. "Tommy!" I screamed, the chorus of laughter melding into a single, horrific sound as the carousel spun faster, absorbing him into its nightmarish retreat. The warmth of camaraderie exploded with despair, threatening to fracture my sanity. Just before I could process the reality of my friend's disappearance, shadows from the carousel surged towards me with ravenous hunger, wrapping around my limbs in a chilling embrace. I fought valiantly against their tightening grip, but it was to no avail. The force of dread was palpable, dragging me down into their abyss. With every ounce of despair and terror coursing through my veins, I reached for the fading light of Tommy's face and the glowing carousel, but the darkness devoured all hope as the laughter crescendoed once more, ringing out into the night. A fitting requiem for a soul forever lost. As I felt myself pulled into the whirlpool of shadows, toppling into the unknown, the final moments of awareness left me with a haunting dread. Was this the playground Tommy spoke of? As my screams dissipated into the cacophony, I could have sworn I heard one final echo, a child's laughter that wasn't my own, mingling with something far more sinister, promising eternal torment. And then darkness enveloped me completely. The world slipped away into nothingness, and I was subsumed in a vast silence, suspended in an inky void where neither time nor space existed. I had imagined death as a cessation, a peaceful acceptance, but instead, I was trapped in a living nightmare, a limbo between life and the twisted horrors that conspired to claim me. Moments or perhaps seconds stretched endlessly, and just as I thought I would drown in darkness, a flicker of light pierced the void, pulling me forward like a moth to a flame. I felt the ghostly fingers of the shadows retreating, but not entirely. They remained coiled around my ankles, a lingering reminder of the carnival of terror I had barely escaped. The light pulsed rhythmically, illuminating fragments of my childhood just beyond the reach of comprehension, a playground, familiar yet deeply unsettling. As I stepped forward, the scene around me began to materialize. I stood at the edge of the very playground I had feared, the swings creaking in the rustling breeze, and jagged shards of rusted metal sprawled like skeletal remains. The air was heavy with the scent of rotting wood and lingering laughter, a sound both joyous and agonizing, echoing against the decrepit structures. Memories crashed against me like waves, Tommy's laughter, the summer spent chasing dreams and fears, and the haunting promise of the dark corners I had tried so desperately to forget. The carousel from the abyss loomed in the center, grotesquely beautiful, with chipped paint and faded colors swirling beneath its eerie glow. It sparkled as if imbued with life, yet the presence surrounding it was palpably malevolent, a seductive invitation cloaked in shadow. The air thrummed with the energy of lost souls, whispering secrets into the rusted metal, and I felt them call my name, weaving a tapestry of dread that ensnared my heart. Instinctively, I stepped back, but my body refused to comply. It insisted on moving forward, entranced by the macabre elegance of the carnival's allure. My steps felt guided, compelled to explore the familiar haunt. The idea twisted in me, nothing could pull me from this nightmare, not when the haunting laughter felt so intimately familiar. I felt Tommy close. Was he watching from the shadows? Did he, too, wander this decaying playground of memories? The laughter erupted anew, circling around me, an invisible barrier thickening as if it could rend me apart. I turned towards the sound, searching for its source, breath hitching in my throat. Suddenly, the shadows shifted, as if tasting the air, an urgent presence flickered at the edge of my vision. A figure, familiar yet warped by darkness, emerged from behind the rusting slidy, a child, thin and pale, with hollow eyes that glimmered with an otherworldly light. The matted hair framed a face that both terrified and enthralled me. "Help us," the child murmured, voice a hoarse whisper that stirred a potent mix of dread and concern. I felt my pulse quicken. This was no ordinary child, it was one of the lost, a spirit entwined with the playground's haunting history. I stepped closer, drawn to the child's anguished gaze. "What happened here?" I asked, my voice shaking, uncertain of making contact with the unseen world. "Where's Tommy?" Before the child could respond, the fabric of reality warped, shadows billowing from beneath the carousel's base, stretching unnaturally towards me. "Do you want to stay?" it asked, tilting its head at an impossible angle, eyes reflecting the incoherent terror surrounding us. "There is joy here forever." Suddenly, the world screamed, pitch rising as I was engulfed by writhing tendrils of darkness, struggling against their firm grip. I grasped for the child, for Tommy, to break free, but their faces twisted into a nightmarish allure, illuminated by the blazing light of the carousel. The voices surged, rising in ecstatic torment, an insatiable rhythm of desperation that called to me like a siren. The carousel began to spin faster, an irresistible force enveloping everything. I could feel time unraveling again, slipping through my fingers like sand, despair rolling in like turbulent waves. The laughter twisted into agonized cries, and I screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed endlessly into the void, terrified and confused. Where do I belong? Then, I saw them. Shapes emerging from the darkness, countless figures, their faces familiar yet faded like old photographs, swirling around me, beckoning with skeletal fingers. The air thickened with their collective despair, and as they reached out to me, I recognized their last names, the children from my childhood, those who had vanished, yet somehow had always been here, bound to this forsaken place. "Join us," they cried in unison, voices melding into a wave of shivering terror, each pleading for a companion in their eternal gloom. "You belong, just like us." And then the ground roared beneath me. I was sucked into a vortex of shadows, the screams blending into an agonizing crescendo that drowned all thought. As I spiraled into the abyss of despair, I glimpsed one last familiar figure beckoning amidst the chaos. Tommy, eyes wide with terror, mouth agape in a silent scream, as darkness engulfed us both. The laughter crescendoed, and with it, a chilling realization settled over me. His was only the beginning. As the final light dimmed, I was forced to confront a terrifying truth. The playground had been waiting all along, its twisted games just starting, and I was now one of its lost. The night pressed in on me, a heavy, cloying darkness that seemed almost sentient in its intent. I stumbled forward through the forest, each step weighted with a dread that clung to my bones. My eyes remained locked on the flickering glow ahead, the skeletal remains of the playground that haunted my past, twisting and turning in the shadows like a memory I couldn't shake off. Yet something shifted within me, a flickering ember of rebellion ignited by the pain I'd endured. I had to stop this. I couldn't be the next child swallowed by the darkness that thrived on fear and despair. The soft murmurs of laughter followed me, following my pulse, growing louder until they echoed with a frenzied glee that sent chills racing down my spine. That I stumbled into the clearing, the ground suddenly giving way to soft grass slick with rain, soaked from the perpetual storm that never seemed to relent. But as I approached the dulled carousel, I could feel it thrumming with a life of its own, the shadows revolving around it becoming more pronounced. Figures cloaked in darkness danced in and out of obscurity, their laughter mingling with the sound of rusted metal creaking. Yet what horrified me most was the chilling reality of the faces surrounding meth children who had vanished over the years, their eyes wide, unblinking in their pleading. "Help us!" they cried out in unison, a haunting chorus that struck deep within me, peeling back the layers of my own innocence, each voice an echo of despair in a world that had betrayed them. They beckoned me closer, their elongated fingers stretching with desperate yearning as if I might bridge the gap between hope and despair. Suddenly, the carousel ground to a halt, its central hub radiating with an unearthly glow that illuminated the joy turned to anguish written on each face. I felt the temperature drop, a cold hand gripping my heart as a familiar voice cut through the shadows. "You should have never come back. You know what happens to those who do that." I spun around to find Tommy standing just behind me, his form a ghastly echo of the boy I had known, the laughter he once enjoyed replaced by an unnatural chill. "You're trapped in the playground now." His tone wavered, and for the briefest instant, a flicker of compassion crossed his face before it drained like color from an old photograph. "Tommy, I came to help," I whispered, desperation lacing my words. But before I could take a step closer, the shadows began to writhe at my feet, gaining form, shifting like a wispy fog coiling around me with insatiable hunger. "No. You have to fight it. They'll take you." Tommy yelled, horror seeping into his eyes as the shadows surged, distorting into a black mass. "Join us." The chorus of voices twisted together, a promise of joy that turned foul and sour. Each child's visage flickered with duality, one moment a hopeful smile, the next a twisted grimace that spoke of emptiness. I shook my head violently, my heart racing as I reached for Tommy, desperate to pull him away from the beckoning shadows. "Don't you see? It was never about you, it's about them," he cried, his voice cracking under the mounting pressure as the shadows grasped at my silhouette, pulling me towards the carousel. "This playground, that's what they want. Your joy, your despair, to join their eternal game." With a sudden surge of clarity, I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the warmth of the memories that felt fractured yet vivid. But then the world warped, darker than before, as the carousel began to spin, music reverberating through the air, cacophonous and haunting. The rhythm pulsed through the ground, I felt it in the marrow of my bones as whispers cocooned me. I was being ensnared by memories, voices twisting around me promising home and belonging, a warmth that turned frigid if I lingered too long. No. I shouted, forcing my way through the encroaching shadows. Yet here among the memories, the children tugged at my resolve, each connection feasting upon my fear. "Let them go," I yelled, focusing on Tommy's face, the essence of a childhood that should have remained safe, not swallowed whole by shadows yearning for owners of laughter distorted into screams. "Join us in play," they yelped, an ear-splitting cacophony. Desperation urged me forward. I had to break through. "No more games," I screamed with every ounce of my being, willing the shadows to relent as a scorching blaze ignited within me. The carousel shrieked as if hurt, the colors swirling chaotically, and in that instant, I pushed forward, forcing the painful reality of Tommy's sacrifice to rise to the surface. "Tommy, remember our games? The laughter? The days without fear? We had fun together." I shouted into the tempest of shifting shadows, and for a brief moment, I saw hope flicker behind the darkness in Tommy's eyes, a brief spark of clarity, but then the shadows betrayed their own hunger, consuming the memory. "No. You're ours," they screeched, their grip tightening even further, and despite my resistance, with every beat of my heart, I was tethered to the tumult, the promise of permanence coming with terrifying cost. And then, just as the bridge between light and darkness began to fracture completely, I reached forward one last time, feeling the burgeoning warmth that echoed from lost mingled with longing. "Come back with me, Tommy. We can break free together," I pleaded, stretching my hand towards him in a defiance that fractured my mind. At that moment, his face melted, morphing back to that innocent boy I had known, and I saw the flicker of determination as his expression shifted. "Don't let it take you," he cried, and I propelled myself toward him, our hands connecting amidst the madness, frantically pulling against the shadows. The carousel screeched a final, agonizing note, shadows recoiling as our touch conjured memories brighter than nightmares. Tommy's laughter echoed in defiance of the darkness, a power surfacing between us that screamed for freedom, but the shadows were relentless, lashing out with cruel velocities, flinging me backward as a chilling wail erupted, filling the air with dread. Just before I was consumed, I felt the painful, bitter retreat of Tommy's presence. "No. I shrieked, my heart breaking as I was torn from the tangible warmth of friendship, feeling cold fingers tugging me further into the vortex of despair, and suddenly, without warning, the shadows surged forward once more, consuming his image, laughter warping into agonizing screams. I gasped as the light began to dim, the carousel dissolving into darkness, a cavity of defeated echoes swallowing me whole. But in that split second, I realized the tragic truth: no matter how deeply I felt pain, I had escaped, but the darkest echo of the playground still lingered. The grip of despair hadn't loosened, it merely shifted focus. That I hadn't just been a player. I had become a game piece, a haunting reflection pulled into this nightmarish realm forever. And as the shadows dimmed, I heard a voice that echoed throughout the forgotten corners of despair, a chilling promise of sweet darkness. You belong to the playground now, trapped in an existence I'd never wished for. The last thing that resonated within me was the haunting laughter, an echo looming close, bitter with the knowledge that my fate was now as entwined in darkness as the lost children whose laughter faded into oblivion, just as I succumbed into unending night. And in the recesses of my mind, the chilling truth cemented itself: escape was never an option. I had simply welcomed the shadows home.